Betty's hands shook as she clutched the photograph. Her own face stared back, frozen mid-laugh at a cafe table. Behind her, Julian lingered in the frame, his eyes not on the camera, but on her, watching. The front door clicked shut. Curtis's footsteps echoed across the penthouse floor, steady, deliberate. Betty. His voice was smooth, practiced, too calm.
We need to talk.
Her breath caught. Should she confront him, hide the photographs, destroy them? She shoved the box back under the bed just as Curtis stepped into the doorway. He loosened his tie, gaze flicking to her trembling hands. His smile was faint, unreadable.
What's wrong?
He asked. Betty forced her voice steady.
Nothing. Just tired.
But inside, a storm raged. Who had placed those photographs under their bed? Why was Julian in one of them? Fear gnawed at her ribs like teeth. Days blurred into a fog of suspicion. Curtis's control grew tighter, checking her phone, demanding details of her whereabouts. Yet beneath his dominance was a fragility, a man desperately trying to hold together a mask that kept slipping. The notes continued. One slipped beneath her art book. Trust no one, not even him. The him could mean Curtis or Julian. Betty's mind spiraled. At the museum, Julian pulled her aside. His eyes were sharp, restless. You found them, didn't you? He whispered. Her pulse spiked.
The photographs. You knew.
Julian nodded. I tried to warn you. Curtis is dangerous.
Then why are you in one of them?
For the first time, Julian faltered. His jaw clenched, gaze breaking from hers. I can explain, but not here. That night, Betty met Julian in a dimly lit cafe. Rain battered the windows. The world outside felt blurred, unreal. Julian leaned close, voice low. Curtis is not who you think. I've been tracking him for months. He's been collecting women, watching them. It starts with obsession, ends with control. Some of them disappear. Betty's throat closed. Disappear? Julian slid a folder across the table. Inside were clippings, missing persons, women around the city. Different ages, different backgrounds. All had one thing in common. They had crossed paths with Curtis through charity boards, corporate functions, or fundraisers. You're not his first, Julian said. Betty's blood turned cold. And you? What's your part in this? I was one of the investigators hired by a family who lost their daughter. I got too close, and Curtis made me the hunted. I needed proof. That's why I've been near you. His eyes burned with conviction. You're the key to exposing him, Betty. But you have to decide. Stay silent and be his next victim, or help me bring him down. Her pulse hammered in her ears. It was a pact, a dangerous one. And if she agreed, there was no turning back. From then on, every moment with Curtis felt like a countdown. Betty noticed the way his eyes lingered on her too long, calculating. The way he touched her. Not tenderly, but possessively, as if confirming she was still his. Julian urged her to gather evidence, bank records, secret phones, anything that tied Curtis to the missing women. The risk was suffocating. At night, while Curtis slept beside her, Betty crept through his locked drawers, copying files, photographing ledgers. She found a burner phone, messages coded with numbers and initials. One night, she nearly got caught. Curtis stirred, reaching for her in the dark. Betty froze, her heart galloping, until his breathing steadied back into sleep. It was a game of inches, a dance where one misstep could mean ruin. The final piece fell into place when Betty intercepted a message on Curtis's burner phone. Delivery confirmed. Next stage, Midday, She won't see it coming. Midday. The word clawed at her. A code? Or literal? She showed it to Julian. His face darkened. It's happening soon. He's planning something. For you. The fear of the unknown became a countdown to something unspeakable. They needed proof strong enough to shatter Curtis's mask publicly. A police report wouldn't hold without evidence. Curtis's wealth and influence could bury everything. Tomorrow, Julian whispered. We set the trap. They staged it carefully. Julian set up hidden cameras in the penthouse, while Betty pretended routine. Her hands shook as she cooked dinner, Curtis sipping wine at the counter, eyes glinting with amusement.
Something's different about you,
He said. Betty forced a smile.
Maybe I'm just happy.
But Curtis's gaze lingered, sharp, dissecting. When he left the room, Julian slipped Betty a small recorder. Keep it on you. Get him to talk. It felt like walking barefoot across broken glass. The trap didn't go as planned. Curtis returned earlier than expected from a late-night meeting. His eyes flicked across the room, noticing subtle details. The shifted vase, the faint outline of camera cords. His smile was thin, dangerous. Who's been in my house? Betty's throat closed. No one. Curtis's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with bruising force. Don't lie to me. The recorder in her pocket pressed against her ribs like a heartbeat. Then his eyes softened, eerily. He kissed her knuckles, a mockery of tenderness. It's all right, Betty. You'll understand soon. Midday tomorrow. He released her, leaving her trembling. Julian hissed into her earpiece later. He knows. We have to move faster. The game had flipped. They weren't hunting Curtis. He was hunting them. The next day stretched like an execution. Betty sat in the living room, sunlight pouring through glass walls, ticking clock echoing in her skull. Curtis entered, calm, immaculate in his suit. He placed a small box on the table. For you, he said. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside wasn't jewelry. It was a photograph of her, sleeping, taken just last night. Her stomach dropped. Curtis leaned close. His whisper slid like a knife. Do you know what I love most, Betty? The moment fear blooms in your eyes. That's when you're most beautiful. Hidden cameras recorded every word. Betty's breath caught. She needed him to confess more.
You did this to the others too, didn't you?
She whispered. Curtis's smile was a serpent's. They weren't strong enough to last. But you fight. You make the game worth playing. His words sealed it. Proof. But then Curtis's gaze flicked. Straight to the hidden camera. He smiled into the lens.
I hope you're watching, Julian.
Betty froze. How did he know? The door burst open. Julian stormed in, gun drawn. Step away from her, Curtis. Curtis chuckled, unshaken.
Ah, the night. Always late to the dance.
It happened fast. Curtis lunged, knocking the gun aside. The struggle was violent, crashing into glass and steel. Betty screamed, torn between fear and fury. Julian shouted, "Run, Betty!" But she didn't. Something inside her snapped. She grabbed the wine bottle from the counter and smashed it against Curtis's head. He staggered, blood streaking his temple, but his eyes burned with savage delight. "Finally," he growled, "you're showing your true self." They fought, a triangle of obsession, betrayal, and survival. The line between victim and predator blurred in every movement. At the climax, Betty seized the gun. Both men froze. Her breath came ragged, finger trembling on the trigger. Curtis's voice was calm, hypnotic. "You won't do it. You need me. You're mine." Julian shouted, "End it, Betty!" He'll never stop. Two voices, two fates. Betty's hand steadied. The gun fired. Silence. Smoke. Curtis collapsed, a crimson bloom spreading across his shirt. His smile lingered, even as life drained from his eyes, as though death itself was part of his plan. Betty dropped the gun, sobs ripping through her. Julian rushed to her, pulling her close. "It's over," he whispered. But as police swarmed hours later, summoned by anonymous tips, Betty realized nothing was truly over. The footage captured Curtis's confession, but questions swirled. Who planted the first notes? Who set the chain in motion? Julian avoided her gaze as officers took their statements, and then she saw it. On the folder Julian had shown her weeks ago, a signature scrawled in the corner. The handwriting was identical to the anonymous notes. Her blood ran cold. Later that night, alone in a holding room, Betty replayed every moment. Julian's timing, his warnings, his presence in the photographs. The truth clawed at her. Julian hadn't just been investigating. He had been orchestrating, nudging her toward Curtis's destruction, using her fear as his weapon. Like a movie, Betty recalls the events leading up to the moments. Julian isn't just a random photographer or investigator. He parted ways with Curtis years back after a business dispute. Julian inserts himself into Betty's life at her most vulnerable moment, her wedding. He knows Curtis is controlling, and he knows Betty is lonely, starved for validation. By presenting himself as the one who sees her, Julian slowly positions himself as her confidant and rescuer. The handwritten warnings Betty finds aren't from Curtis's enemies or random outsiders. They're Julian's work. He plants paranoia in Betty's mind, making her question Curtis's fidelity, honesty, and even her own sanity. The notes are a psychological wedge designed to erode trust in her marriage until she turns to Julian. Julian knows Curtis has secrets, shady deals, surveillance of women, a sadistic streak. But instead of exposing Curtis himself, Julian waits and uses Betty as bait. He pushes her to gather evidence, confront Curtis, and ultimately take violent action. Betty is maneuvered into becoming both victim and weapon. The so-called trap with cameras and recorders was never about saving Betty. It was about forcing Curtis and Betty into confrontation. Julian set the board so that Betty would be the one holding the gun. When Curtis dies, Betty's hands are bloody, leaving her dependent on Julian, the only one who understands what really happened. Julian's ultimate plan is psychological ownership. By saving Betty, by drawing her into Curtis's downfall, by orchestrating her transformation into a killer, Julian binds her to him. She owes him. She can't expose him without exposing herself. It's not love he seeks. It's possession through manipulation. Where Curtis sought to dominate Betty physically and emotionally, Julian does it psychologically. He engineers her descent, then steps in as her only anchor. Julian is not just another predator. He's worse because he hides behind the mask of a rescuer. He doesn't need chains or threats. He makes Betty choose him, until the line between manipulation and devotion blurs. By the end, Betty isn't sure if she's free, or if she's entered a new cage. Betty stared at her reflection in the glass window of the holding room. Her eyes were different now, darker, harder. Fear of the unknown had devoured her life. Now she was left with something even more terrifying, the knowledge that the game wasn't over. The final frame froze on her face, trembling between victim and predator. The echo of Sarah's words, Betty's mom's, lingered and rings in her memory. Don't end up alone. That's the real prison.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the Crimson Motives channel for more thrilling stories.